Hello guys, welcome to my channel. The less is more. So today we will discuss new explained page that is different from the editorial. Okay, and it is from Indian Express. Absolutely, and that is the topic is foreign policy and strategy, right? So, and the title, let's start the editorial. The title is India and the Chips War. Okay. India and the Chips War. India has positioned itself as a player in the critical semiconductor tech field with a major US partnership, but it must make up for the 4 decade delayed start and negotiate formidable challenges that lie ahead. The expensive new US India technology partnership forged during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington DC identifies technology as the new geopolitical frontier. Technology is the new geopolitical frontier. A key element of partnership is the resolve to diversify the global semiconductor supply chain, which is at the center of the rivalry between the world's number 1 and number 2 economic powers, that US and China. So, what was the objective? Diversify the global semiconductor supply chain, which is at the center of the rivalry between world's number 1 and 2 economic power. So, diversify global semiconductor supply chain. That is the only objective. Okay. Now, chips, the new oil. Okay. Semiconductors or chips are essential to almost every modern device, from a phone to advanced defense system, not to speak of advanced artificial intelligence powered machines. But only a few countries are in the business of making chips among the world's most advanced technologies, and some specialize only in some aspects of it. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the US dependence on supply chains. In Asia, 4 of the top chip makers in the world are Taiwanese. At the same time as the trade and diplomatic war between Washington and Beijing and military tensions in the Taiwan Strait spiked, following a media report on an alleged White House contingency plan to destroy the world's largest chip making factory in Taiwan in the event of Chinese invasion. The South China Morning Post last October ran a headline, "Chips are the new oil and Taiwan is the new Saudi Arabia." Since 2020, the US has taken a number of steps aimed at 1. Denying semiconductor technology to China to prevent it from gaining high-tech dominance over the world. Pumping up its own capacity for making chips. The Trump administration listed the Chinese telecom giant Huawei and several ancillaries as a threat to US national security and restricted their access to chips from US companies. The Biden administration retained restriction on Huawei and introduced its own, effectively cutting off the world's largest manufacturer of 5G phones and other Chinese companies from semiconductors made using American tools and software. In August 2022, Congress passed the CHIPS and Science Act, providing $280 billion in new funding for domestic research and manufacturing of semiconductors in the US. The US also moved towards semiconductor friendshoring in the Quad, where the leaders of Australia, Japan, India, and the US committed themselves to building resilient, diverse, and secure supply chains of critical and emerging technologies over 2 summits in 21 and 22. India US ICET. Also at the 2022 summit in Tokyo, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi announced the US India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. In January this year, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and his US counterpart Jake Sullivan met in Washington to discuss the broad areas for cooperation under ICET. The initiatives listed in the US India joint statement in the technology basket during the Modi visit flow from the January meeting, during which the two countries agreed to enhance bilateral cooperation on resilient supply chain, support the development of a semiconductor design, manufacturing and fabrication ecosystem in India, and promote development of skilled workforce for the industry. A task force set up by the US Semiconductor Industry Association and India Electronics Semiconductor Association, together with the government semiconductor mission, was to make a readiness assessment to identify near-term opportunities and facilitate long-term strategic development of complementary semiconductor ecosystems. The task force would also flag opportunities and challenges for India's role in the global semiconductor value chain. During Modi's visit, all this translated into MOU on semiconductor supply chain and innovation partnership to promote commercial opportunities, research, talent and skill development. Micron Technology, a leading US semiconductor firm, announced a proposed investment of up to $825 million to build a facility in India, with the Indian government pitching in to take the combined investment value to $2.75 million. It is hoped that this will create up to 5,000 new direct and 15,000 community job opportunities in the next 5 years. Lam Research announced a proposal to train 60,000 Indian engineers through its Semiverse Solution virtual fabrication platform, and Applied Materials announced a proposed investment of $400 million to establish a collaborative engineering center in India. India's chip challenge. India has allocated 76,000 crore for the semiconductor industry. While there is plenty of optimism, the mission has been beset with difficulties. Three companies that applied to set up fabrication plants with the first tranche of government support, a Foxconn and Vedanta joint venture, Singapore's IGSS, and a joint venture between Next Orbit and Chip Consortium ISMS that was banking on Israel's Tower Semiconductor as a tech partner, all failed to get off the ground for separate reasons. The $3 billion ICMS Tower plan reportedly tripped up on the planned acquisition of Tower by Intel. The $19 billion Foxconn Vedanta venture was not able to close talks with the European chip maker STM Microelectronics, and the Singapore-based IGSS dropped out. The government reopened application with modified specification on June 1, and Foxconn and Vedanta have applied again. Applications will be accepted until December 2024, but it remains to be seen if the extended deadline without an expanded promise applicants had hoped for a larger government buy-in will bring in the big players. Three things are essential for chip makers: uninterrupted and uninterruptible power, unlimited pure water supply, and chip making infrastructure. The fabs or fabrication plants that are highly specialized units. At the moment, there is no place in India that can guarantee 24/7 power or water supply. Chip manufacturing also requires a highly skilled workforce. Industry experts have repeatedly said that chip making is not like assembling a phone. The absence of chip ecosystem is why, despite the political will, no big international chip maker has yet shown interest in India. Other than requirement for chip making itself, a huge set of ancillary industries have to take shape, including electronics manufacturers who can create domestic market for chips. Taiwan has long been pushing India for a free trade agreement and a bilateral investment agreement to make it more attractive for TSMC, the world's biggest chip maker, to set up base here, but Delhi has been reluctant. The announcement by Micron as Minister of State for Electronics and IT Rajiv Chandrasekhar told Indian Express in an interview is for semiconductor packaging. Our strategy is that packaging will create a global presence for us in the labor market and supply chains, we can use that capability to vertically integrate back into fabs. Certainly, it is clearly our expectation that Micron at some point will also start making the wafers. As India is unlikely to be manufacturing chips by 24 when Micron hopes to have an up and running plant in Gujarat, Chandrasekhar said the company will bring in their existing mature supply chains. These chains will either transplant their plants to India and grow their indigenous value addition, or they may be substituted with some domestic equivalent when it reaches that threshold quality and the standard level that are necessary. State of the chip wars. In 2020, China was the biggest market for semiconductor machines. Beijing's Made in China 2025 plan launch in 19 had prioritized achieving self-sufficiency in semiconductors, but the export controls set in motion by the US and more are in the pipeline have made China's mission look difficult, if not impossible. Japan has also announced restriction on semiconductor exports to China. The Japanese restriction will take effect from July. China has lashed out at the move and warned of consequences. As US works with key partners to restrict Chinese access to cheap tech. China's cheap imports from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, part of the US led Chip 4 alliance, fell by 20% in the first 5 months of 23. According to the latest trade numbers, US is also lobbying the Netherlands to take similar steps. The Dutch company ASML is the only maker in the world of deep ultraviolet lithography machines that are required to make certain kind of chips. All things considered, India is said to be at least 2 decades behind the chip curve. It could take the country 10 to 20 years to establish itself a serious player in the semiconductor industry. For now, New Delhi has positioned itself in the global chip war with a technology partnership that promises to take bilateral ties with the US to the next level. So, guys, this was today's explained page. We have seen how chip is the new oil, what is India US ICET, what is India's chip challenge, okay, and what is state of the chip was. Why it's a challenge? Because India does not have sufficient chip making ecosystem, okay. It requires 24/7 uninterrupted power supply and pure water supply, okay. So this and a highly skilled workforce, okay. These three things that have not been made ground for the proper ground for the semiconductor industry to establish plants and facilities in the India. So they are waiting for the ecosystem and some ancillary industries to be created. So till the December 2024 there is no any hope for semiconductor or the chips to be made in India. Recently Micron has signed MOU with the Gujarat government, but it is not the fully chip making company, but it's a chip packaging industry. So it is being hoped that this chip packaging industry will create some ancillary industries and will make some ground for the other biggest chip makers to come to India, okay. So till then we have to see that's how this semiconductor plan of India will get its shape in the reality, okay. So till then, bye bye, signing off for the day.